As I was landing on the airplane, I got a transcript of some questions President Trump was asked at the White House today about what I would call Margarita-gate. I don't know if you guys have been following this, but President Bukele, after I met with Kilmar, did this tweet showing us at a table with these two glasses. So here's what happened. When I first sat down with Kilmar, we just had glasses of water on the table. I think maybe some coffee. And as we were talking, one of the government people came over and deposited two other glasses on the table with ice, and I don't know if it was salt or sugar around the top, but they look like margaritas. And if you look at the one they put in front of Kilmar,
it would be true that the cover-up is worse than the crime for Donald Trump if the crimes weren't so blatant and so bad. And that is clearly the case with his unlawful deportation of Abrego Garcia, and every action he has taken since to try to cover up or shift the narrative. And he's been doing that with some of the most insane posts we have seen, not only out of his presidency, but in the entire time Donald Trump has been online, which is a pretty high standard to be able to clear. And Jasmine Crockett ripped into him for one of the latest ones. And then his response was even worse. But we're going to get into all of it. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now, let's get into Jasmine Crockett, just calling out Donald Trump. In this clip right here.
Congresswoman, it's good to see you. We just got that ruling at 1 a.m. from the United States Supreme Court. The court doubling back on an earlier ruling, giving the administration the go-ahead to deport these individuals. Do you feel hopeful, though, that the courts are trying to rein in Donald Trump? Are we really set in a constitutional crisis now? Because Trump flaunts the fact that he has no intentions of bringing Abrego Garcia back to America. I mean, check out what was posted on X yesterday by the official White House account.
Yeah, so first of all, it was great to see you. And one of my colleagues actually put this post up in a group chat, and I was like, okay, this isn't real, right? Because it was just the picture. And then she was like, no, it's absolutely real. And I was like, who are we and where are we living and who is running this country? Because the level of childness that we saw in this post, but also just the level of cruelty and the level of admission that we've seen, right? Like, Katie, you and I both know that ultimately this is not the last that we have seen of this post. This post will most likely show up in some court filing when they are trying to determine whether or not this court has, or I'm sorry, this administration has intentionally decided that it wanted to ignore a court order. This will most likely show up in a contempt hearing. So I don't know why, I don't know who's advising, or I don't know if they really do care. The reason that I was cheering, though, was because of all courts, I cannot imagine that it was anybody on really this court, this particular court, that at 1 a.m. decided that they were going to do right, besides obviously the three that have their heads on correctly. So the fact that this wasn't a 9-0 decision is still very disappointing, but the fact that we got to a 7-2 is a win, especially at 1 in the morning. And essentially what this does is kind of like what Judge Boasberg did when he said, hey, stop, do not deliver those people into El Salvador, turn that plane around. Basically, they're saying that plane better not take off, and we know how y'all like to act. So we will see ultimately what the Supreme Court comes up with, and I'm not necessarily the most hopeful about the Supreme Court, but we also will see how this court decides to act. And I think right now they're trying to figure out, is this a administration that will even ignore our court orders? And I think that that may sway how they decide to rule on this particular underlying issue.
And, you know, Maryland Senator Van Hollen just went to El Salvador after meeting with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He said he thinks that El Salvador was feeling some pressure, and that's why they let him meet with him. But ultimately, Nayib Bukele saying he's going to remain in the custody of El Salvador. We need to see more action, though, from people kind of emulating what we saw from Senator Van Hollen, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first of all, kudos to Senator Van Hollen. And honestly, that's what it looks like to be an elected representative. He represents Maryland. This is someone who is a Maryland resident, and he decided that he was going to go down there and check on him. And honestly, I don't know that I was convinced that he was alive. I really don't. And so I was happy to see that he was alive, number one. But number two, if Senator Van Hollen can get down there, if the president can get up here and get to the White House, then I don't understand why we can't get Abrego up out of there. I mean, we know that they admitted that they were wrong. Now they're trying to double back and say, well, he's this terrible person and all this kind of stuff. But here's the reality. As far as I'm concerned, he's a lot less criminal than the person that's sitting in the White House. Because last time I checked, he doesn't have any criminal convictions. I don't even think he has any outstanding cases versus the guy that still had cases pending when he was sworn in on January 20th and also has 34 felony convictions. So listen, I don't want to hear anything from the Republican Party about how they're trying to keep us safe when their fearless leader is actually the biggest criminal thus far that we have seen, because I haven't seen anybody with a rap sheet that looks like the president's.
I talked about this yesterday. Of course, the unlawful deportation of Ago Garcia is the most disgusting aspect of this all. But what they've done since just goes to show how evil this administration truly is. Bringing in a mother who lost her daughter to an MS-13 gang member is a tragedy, but it has nothing to do with Ago Garcia. Trying to exploit that story has nothing to do with this man, whose rights have been taken away from him. And the margarita photo was absurdity, trying to claim that this guy, who was snatched up from his community by mass thugs and put on a plane to El Salvador, is somehow living like a beachy, a great, it's a great vibe and a great hang. And we're chilling by the pool, instead of being thrown in a torture prison, is disgusting. And now we see these posts lying about a New York Times story or trying to digitally alter photos of him. It's just disgusting. The effort continues, and it just shows how much they know that they have screwed up, especially because we saw Senator Van Hollen call this out in a clip.
Now I just want to take a moment. I hadn't planned to do this, but as I was landing on the airplane, I got a transcript of some questions President Trump was asked at the White House today about what I would call Margaritagate. I don't know if you guys have been following this, but President Bukele, after I met with Kilmar, did this tweet showing us at a table with these two glasses. So here's what happened. When I first sat down with Kilmar, we just had glasses of water on the table. I think maybe some coffee. And as we were talking, one of the government people came over and deposited two other glasses on the table with ice, and I don't know if it was salt or sugar around the top, but they look like margaritas. And if you look at the one they put in front of Kilmar, it actually had a little less liquid than the one in front of me, to try to make it look, I assume, like he drank out of it. Let me just be very clear. Neither of us touched the drinks that were in front of us. And if you want to play a little Sherlock Holmes, I'll tell you how you can know that. So if you look at the video or the picture I sent out from the beginning of our meeting, you'll see there are no glasses on the table. So you'll see in later videos they are on the table. But they made a little mistake. First, some people are very careful, right? If you sip out of one of those glasses, some of whatever it was, salt or sugar, would disappear. You would see a gap. There's no gap. Nobody drank any margaritas or sugar water or whatever it is. But this is a lesson into the lengths that President Bukele will do to deceive people about what's going on. And it's also shows the lengths that the Trump administration and the president will go to, because when he was asked about a reporter about this, he just went along for the ride. So the White House and the president have been lying about this case from the beginning. They've been trying to change the subject from the beginning. As I said, and the courts have said, from the Supreme Court to the Fourth Circuit to the District Court, what this is about is adhering to the Constitution, to the right of due process. And that's why we say, bring Kilmar home, so he can be afforded his rights under the Constitution. That's what this is about.
The firestorm his deportation has caused here in America.
So I told him. That was the first he'd heard.
You can address the camera.
Sure. The first he heard is that after I told him that his family was fighting for him, I told him everybody else that was fighting for him, including his union members, but also people from across Maryland, in fact, across the country, who recognize that depriving Kilmar of his constitutional rights is a threat to everybody who resides in America. He had not heard that. I believe that gave him additional strength.
Senator, what did Abrego Garcia say that the officials in El Salvador told him about why he was sent to that prison and how long he would be there?
They haven't told him anything about why he was sent.
Or how long he would be there?
They didn't tell him anything about that. In fact, I asked the vice president exactly that question. You know, why is he here? Is he violating any laws in El Salvador? Do you have any proof that he's committed a crime? No. Why are you here? Why is he here? Because the Trump administration is paying us to keep him here.
Did he say what he heard from other migrants that were also there, that were also deported to that prison?
Did what? I'm sorry.
Did he say what he had heard from others who were also deported to that prison?
He did not know about what was happening in the outside world. And let me just say, at CROCKETT, I want to be really clear. At CROCKETT, they don't let any of the prisoners have access to the outside world. That's one of the conditions, one of the notorious parts of that prison, which, by the way, is a blatant violation of international law, as I said when I was in
Senator, you're the first person that can see a person that was in CROCKETT and that left CROCKETT even for a few minutes. What did he say about how it is being there? Because he's the first prisoner from CROCKETT that was outside, ever.
Oh, as I think I said, I mean, he said what he said was that it was his best guess that most of the cells were packed with about 100 people. I asked him why. He said when they take a roll call during the day, people have to call out their names from different cells. As I said, in his cell, I believe there were about 25 people until he was moved. But as I said, while he wasn't fearful of the other prisoners in his own cell, he was fearful about the taunts that he received from other prisoners in
I am so glad that Senator Van Hollen is demonstrating the bravery that we need out of so many more Democrats. Taking this stand couldn't be more important. And also showing this is an issue for us to win on. It shouldn't be about a political issue. It should be about a human rights issue and defending this man. But I feel like there are too many elected Democrats who operate. You know, based on what does the polling say? You know, let's get a message test going. Let's focus group this one. Instead of just leading. It is your job to lead. It is your job to have values. To stand by them. To believe in them. To go out and espouse and execute on them. Clearly what Senator Van Hollen is doing. And showing Democrats, yes, people don't like Donald Trump's illegal mass deportations. Maybe you should talk about that. Not only because it's right, but it's going to help us. I don't know why I have to keep saying it's going to help us. But clearly that's the only thing that gets people to move. It shouldn't be, but then it is also our job to make sure they know. And again, I hate that we have to do this for them. You'd think that because we elected them, they'd do their job as elected leaders. Not always the case. Chuck Schumer, different story. But yeah, let's show him that we are on the side of fighting against this violation of due process. This violation of our Constitution. I saw some article with a leaked quote from an anonymous Democrat saying, "It's just one person. It's just one guy. Let's not get a big fuss about this." No, these are human rights, and once they violate his, they're coming after yours next. We have to call this out. We're certainly going to on this show. And I so appreciate all the Democrats who are doing that. Leading the way, Jasmine Crockett, Bernie Sanders, AOC, Senator Van Hollen. We're going to be doing it on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. Until next time, I'll see you.